Um, all right. If you're just joining us, we're going to give folks maybe a couple of minutes to join us as well. And in the meantime, I'm going to mute myself real quick. Senator Allen?
Yes, I'm here. Can you?
Oh, so I'm wondering if you can. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna send you another link real quick because I think you joined us via the registration link and not that panelist link. So I'm gonna send this to your email real quick.
Well, I'm on my laptop that works the best, and you better send me. All right, better be a short link because I'll have to type it in
Okay.
on this
Okay.
computer.
Okay.
I could probably text her the, oh, yeah, she probably can't get the text on there.
Well, I have the Zoom meeting and the password, but he says ask
Right.
for.
Yeah.
Just text it to me.
Oh, okay. Give me like 2 seconds.
Well, if you did it through email, that's fine. I'll look on my phone.
Good morning, everybody. If you're just joining us, we're just trying to get Senator Sylvia Allen to for her video to work. So give us like maybe 1-2 minutes and then we'll start.
Okay, I'm just going to do it this way.
Okay,
all right?
perfect, perfect.
Can you hear me?
You're still connecting, but I think you are going to be joining us quite soon.
Okay.
Right now it looks like you've cloned yourself, so that's always fun.
I did what?
You cloned yourself. There's 2 of you.
Yeah.
Oh, so I need to get out of run?
I can. I'm gonna remove one.
Well, no, let me do it.
Okay. Yep.
I don't
Sure.
want you to move.
Yep. Okay. Good morning, everybody. If you're just joining us, we're just trying to troubleshoot something real quick. We want to make sure that Senator Sylvia Allen is, we're able to see her as well. The worst case scenario is that we can hear her and not be able to see her on the video, but she is joining us. She is here. She has joined us.
Okay, can you hear me, Luigi?
Yep, I can hear you. Yep.
And you can see me?
No, not yet. I think you gotta turn on your video.
Okay. And let's see.
Oh, there you go.
There you
Perfect.
are.
All righty. Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Sorry
everybody.
about that.
Oh, no worries. No worries. Thank you, everybody, for being so patient. My name is Luigi Del Puerto. I'm the associate publisher and editor of the Arizona Capital Times. And today we're going to talk about career and technical education for this morning scoop. Of course, the Arizona Capital Times covers state politics and government. And if you don't have a subscription, please let me know, and we'll get that fixed. And first, I want to also thank our sponsors for engaging in this way. Without their support, we cannot hold important forums on important subjects, such as the one that we're talking about this morning. The Arizona CTED Consortium is the state's primary association dedicated to serving Arizona's career and technical education districts. The organization is at the forefront of efforts to advance career and technical education in Arizona. At the state capitol, the consortium seeks to work with policymakers and other stakeholders to ensure that the best career and technical education is available to Arizona students. The Arizona CTED Consortium is advocating, among other things, to restore fourth-year funding for CTE. Also, our sponsor is TriAdvocates, known for its experience and integrity and results. TriAdvocates is among Arizona's premier lobbying and public affairs consulting firms. In addition to lobbying, policy, and advocacy, TriAdvocates also serves its clients in the areas of government and marketing and economic development. Indeed, the TriAdvocates team has firsthand knowledge and experience with all aspects of navigating government. Its extensive contacts, strong bipartisan relationships with and access to local, state, and federal officials make the team very effective in its advocacy for its clients. The lobbying firm distills complex issues into digestible messages and develops effective communication strategies to give a voice to its clients' concerns. And finally, Marson Media is a public relations firm that offers clients a wide array of services and specializes in public affairs, political campaigns, and crisis communications. Among other expertise, Marson Media frames the debate and engages the public to support a client's needs, crafts messages for candidates, and is adept at crisis communication. Marson Media is, of course, the brainchild of Barrett Marson, who draws on his vast experience as a reporter and director of communications for the Arizona House of Representatives and the Arizona Department of Corrections to provide clients with effective strategies for dealing with communication needs. Again, to our sponsors this morning, thank you so much for engaging in this way. We have a powerhouse panel this morning. Senator Sylvia Allen represents LD6 and chairs the Senate Education Committee, a position she has held since 2016. A veteran legislator, Senator Allen was first appointed to the Arizona Senate in June 2008 and won the election in November of that year. She served as supervisor of the Navajo County Board of Supervisors before joining or rejoining the Arizona Senate in 2014. Senator Allen also served as Senate President pro tempore for 3 terms. Senator Allen, thank you for joining us this morning.
You're welcome. Good to be here.
Also with us is C. Kevin Ives. Did I pronounce your last name correct, sir? Kevin, are you there? I think Kevin might have frozen. Kevin is superintendent of the Southwest Technical Education District of Yuma, an accomplished education leader. Kevin has, among other things, started a new career and technical education program, opened a new alternative to suspension school, a new comprehensive high school, and a new school district. Previously, he served as assistant superintendent of educational services for Agua Fria Union High School School District, as director of curriculum for instruction and assessment, also at Agua Fria, and as assistant principal at Deer Valley High School. He also served as principal at Deer Valley Crossroads and as faculty associate at ASU. By training, he's also a classroom teacher, or served as a classroom teacher at Phoenix Union. Kevin, thank you for joining us this morning. Looks like we might have lost Kevin, and hopefully he can rejoin us in a little bit. Also with us this morning is Kathy Prather, who is the superintendent, CEO of Pima JTED. She previously served as the district's deputy superintendent. Her career in education spans 29 years in multiple locations throughout Arizona, including Rough Rock High School, Prescott College, Northwest Pioneer College, Mojave Community College, Mojave High School, Colorado River Union School District, Tucson Unified School District, and of course, Sunnyside Unified School District. She holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Business Administration Management, a Master of Arts degree in Vocational Technical Education, of course, multiple certifications from the Arizona Department of Education, including superintendent, principal, and career and technical education teacher. And finally, we have Representative Michelle Udall, who is representing LD25 and chairs the House Education Committee. She was first elected to the House in 2017. She's a self-proclaimed geek who grew up shooting rockets with his brothers. Representative Udall studied at Harvard and earned her degree in computer sciences from
Actually,
Arizona
MIT.
I'm sorry, MIT?
Yeah.
MIT and my apologies, MIT,
okay.
and earned her degree in computer sciences from Arizona State University and now teaches math at Mountain View High School. She's long been involved in the educational community, serving on the Mesa Public School Governing Board for 4 years before turning her eye to state politics. She is also a small business owner, a bookkeeper, math and science tutor, and a gymnastics coach and judge. Thank you, Representative Udall, for joining us. Kevin, I'm glad you're able to rejoin us as well.
Sorry about that.
No worries. And so I guess I'm going to start with Representative Udall and Senator Sylvia Allen. I want to see what you're hearing about a special session. What is the update? You know, last time we had a morning scoop, we had Representative Regina Cobb who said we'll probably have to do it like after July 1st, which means, you know, we're not going to do it the week of July 4th. So we're probably looking at second week of July. But what are you hearing from your chambers? Let me start with Senator Sylvia Allen.
Thank you. Well, right now, what we're hearing is, you're right, the special session has been put off right at this time, but we're being told that there will be one scheduled. The timing, I just can't give you a definite time of when that's going to happen. But I know that we're concerned about being able to get something done for our schools before their school starts. So I know that I'm pushing to try to get a special session together, and we'll see where this all goes. I'm sorry I don't have more definite to tell you, but we keep asking every day.
Representative Udall, anything different than what Senator Sylvia Allen has said?
We really just don't know. We've heard all kinds of varying things from different people, and sometimes from the same people, that they've changed, you know, that it's changed. I've heard we would come back before the end of June. That's not going to happen. I haven't heard July. I've heard fall.
Fall?
Yeah, I don't know. So we don't know when it's going to happen. I have heard from the governor's office that they're committed to get the education stuff done, whether it's by special session or executive order, that it will happen.
I'm sorry, when you say that they're committed to getting the education stuff done, can you flesh that out? Just what does that mean exactly?
That's a good question. I mean, the flexibility on attendance, how we take attendance, whether they have to be in person every time or whether they can be at home some of the time or all of the time and still counted as attending. Flexibility on some budget stability for next year, some transportation issues for next year. There are quite a few, some emergency procurement issues. So there are several things that we're talking about fixing, but the primary must-haves are that flexibility on attendance and then some budget stability.
And just before we actually open up for broadcast, you did mention that you know, the likelihood of the flexibility in fact happening is very high. I think your words were it's going to happen.
The flexibility for attendance will happen. I don't know if it's going to happen in a special session or if it's going to happen by executive order from the governor's office, but that one everyone has agreed upon, and that one will happen.
Perfect. So, you know, I want to ask our two superintendents. I think the overarching question is that how are the CTEDs? I'm sorry, I always say JTED. In my mind, still JTED. How are the CTEDs doing? Let's talk about your transition to a digital or online platform. How has that been? And how did you manage, or how are you able to manage the fact that, you know, of course, CTED's students, they need hands-on learning. Like that's the whole impetus for CTED, which is hands-on learning, real experience. How did you manage and how were you able to deliver that, you know, in this kind of a setting? Let me ask Kathy first.
It was really challenging at first. We learned that some of our staff didn't even have reliable internet. So we had to not only work with our staff and our students in getting hotspots and technology, to them, we had our principals were delivering laptops to students. So once we worked through the tech issues, then we were looking at the online delivery and doing quick PD and how to deliver via Zoom or Google Meet. Some of our teachers were experienced in doing some online curriculum, others were not. We had students that were out at clinicals. Our nursing students were doing clinicals in local long-term care facilities. They were pulled out of those facilities, obviously, due to safety reasons. So we had to adjust there. But after a couple of weeks, what we did see is we saw some unprecedented things happening. For example, we have an aviation technology program that we contract with Pima Community College. So the students are out at that facility. And what was able to happen is the FAA, unprecedented, was able to allow Pima Community College and our students to be able to take online curriculum, which is unheard of, I guess, in that world. The same with the State Board of Nursing. Kudos to them for allowing us to be able to deliver online instruction, which is something they haven't allowed before. And so we have seen this unprecedented flexibility. And so we're hopeful as we go into the fall that we're going to be able to continue this and be able to do a hybrid in-person and online situation. So I'm very encouraged by what Representative Udall was saying. So we had pretty high engagement of our students because they had been going through our programs for 3/4 of a year. They were pretty intent on working toward their certifications and their credentials. We did lose a few students where we weren't able to get in contact with them once we went online. Some of them disappeared. We're not quite sure what happened, but for the most part, I think we had about a 90% engagement level overall. And now we have a few of our students are coming back and finishing up their hands-on parts with Pima Community College, which we contract with, and through the State Board of Nursing. Some of them are working on their certification testing. So we learned a lot. It was a struggle, but our teachers stepped up, our principals stepped up. We had a tech hotline to be able to deal with some of the tech issues for students and parents and staff. So overall, I think it went okay. My worry is this fall is the fact that we need flexibility and funding to be able to deliver like we did this spring. And so that's a major concern is that flexibility and the funding piece.
You mentioned that some of your students that you were not able to get a hold of them. Have you gotten a hold of them since? I do wonder, and how many are we talking about that you sort of, were not able to complete their programs?
For us, it was probably about 10 or 15 students overall out of the over 2,100 that we have. Just a few handfuls of students. Some of them may have moved away from the area. That's what we're hearing, that in most cases it was because they did move, their families moved.
And Kevin, what was the situation in your district? And I guess the second, I think, overarching question is, how are you dealing with, how's the preparations for the fall?
Well, first of all, I apologize for the technical difficulties that I had. Thank you for allowing me to be able to switch there. So much of what Kathy was saying, we are in a point of recovery at this point. At first, we were transitioning, as quickly as everybody else could. The good thing about career and technical education, one of the mantras is problem solving, and we're in the world's greatest problem solving environment that we could probably have. And so our students, our teachers, are geared toward looking toward this type of way of thinking. And so immediately they go into, how can we solve this? How can we get past this particular dilemma? How can we continue to match our curriculum with the standards that need to be met? And so our transition for CTE students and teachers was probably a little bit easier because of that mantra that you mentioned, real world learning. And so we're taking advantage of that real world learning. Our students, CTE students, are naturally engaged hands-on, so that was a difficulty. But because they're in this world of problem solving and teachers are able to help guide students into that critical thinking, they transitioned into it pretty quickly. And as Kathy had mentioned, we have a 90% engagement rate. And I think that that's indicative of career and technical education in itself. It's a very hands-on, very engaging type of curriculum for which students choose to go into. And so that in itself lends itself to an engagement piece as well. But we're continuing to look at those things for which we could do better. Right now is the summer, and for which we're able to plan for next year. And that hybrid, we know that hybrid learning is going to probably continue, and we had talked a little bit about that offline as well.
Senator Allen, you're pretty steep into your schools in your community, the entire state. But I often hear you talk about the schools in your district, in your county. How are they? What are you hearing from the schools in terms of their preparations for the fall?
Well, definitely this has been one really trying time. And I agree with Kevin that people have stepped up and tried to figure out ways to do this education model during this very critical time. And I just want to say also that the flexibility and the funding that we've been talking about, I think everybody absolutely is on the same page with that. And we will see the help to our schools overall about those two issues. But in my district, but the same problem. Many of these classes are hands-on. I think of one particularly, the welding class. When I talked to Matt Weber, my superintendent over here, about how we survived through these last 3 months, he said it was very difficult, but that they were able to keep track of their students. And what they've done is this summer, they've been able to provide some classes to help them get caught up, especially the seniors, the ones that were going to be graduating. Those are the students that were most concerning. They had certification tests and things of that nature that they were having to pass. And so they've been helping those particular students this summer try to get their certification done and to wrap those classes up. Matt told me that they will be working closely. Of course, I have to send a good shout out to our community colleges who are partners with many of our CTEDs, and without them, we'd be sunk. And so they've had to work closely with them, and they have been able to get organized somewhat for this next school year coming up. They're going to have smaller classes. They're going to try to do the hands-on at the beginning. They're planning on doing the book work from internet, do it online. Now we have a problem in rural Arizona, talking about the connectivity and our broadband and all these situations. We have unique problems, and many of our Navajo students take these CTE classes. It's very important for them, and so we're going to have these problems. There's no doubt about it as we move forward. But they feel like that they've got a plan for this fall or for the new school year coming up, and they're going to be able to work with the different health protocols, and they are planning for that. And I just can't say enough how much I appreciate what these administrators and teachers are going through to try to keep education going for these kids. It's just so critical.
So last time we had Superintendent Kathy Hoffman, she said that as many as 200,000 students did not have a computer or internet, and that was early on. During this phase in which the schools have locked down, and that's an immense challenge for schools. And I do wonder, what about for the CTEDs? Kathy, are all your students already equipped with, to do online learning, to go into a digital platform? You really need two things, right? You need a computer and you need Wi-Fi connection. And we've seen all those problems sort of come to the fore during this this period. But at this point, do all of your kids have a computer? Do they all have Wi-Fi? Do they all have hotspots?
By the time we were able to roll out the equipment for the students that needed it, yes. Every student that needed a laptop or a hotspot was able to receive one. We have a number of our students attend other schools. They attend CTED, JTED, us, part of the day, and they attend their home school, whatever that might be, private, charter, public school. So a lot of those schools were also rolling out pieces of equipment. I think Tucson Unified School District rolled out like 30,000 laptops within the course of 2 months or something like that. But we still had students, for whatever reason, did not have that equipment. So I think all in all, we were about 60 or 70 laptops were delivered to students. We also had, I think, about 40 hotspots. And believe it or not, we had teachers who needed hotspots because they did not have reliable internet where they are. So in the end, yes, we have since collected most of that equipment while we're waiting to see what is going to happen for this fall. We may have to distribute it out again, but overall, yeah, I would say any student who needed the equipment was able to receive it in our area for the most part.
And Kevin, is that true for your district as well? I do wonder, you know, we're here in the Valley, so connectivity is really not a problem here in the Valley, but I can imagine in the rural areas, that's, you know, the broadband issue is a pretty big issue. But also what I'm hearing from, you know, from the teachers, from school leaders is that, all right, so we have a computer, we have Wi-Fi, but the family may not be able to actually help the student for whatever reason. You know, there are some technical barriers that they face. I wonder what first of all, do all of your students already have a computer, and do they have Wi-Fi connection? And I guess the other question is, if they don't have one right now and they're thinking of going into a CTED program, you know, what do they do?
So I would say at this point, about 98% of our students have the equipment that they need, and it's just not a computer. We have an animation program for which students need other technical equipment as well. So we've had to check those items out, as Kathy had mentioned too. Right now we're collecting that, or students are taking their industry certifications on that equipment as well. And so we're waiting until they finish that out. So it is a challenge still in the rural communities, often that there may be only one laptop for a family member or for the whole family. And so, you know, if you've got a multiple child family, or if there's a teacher in the house, then that computer has to be shared between the child and the teacher. And so it does in rural communities, and the connectivity issue is another thing. So people have gotten real creative. They put hotspots on buses. They put buses or hotspots in community centers, so students are able to at least get near those. We have one community where there's, at the school, it's the post office, the library, the school. They even have live animals out there, and this is all at one little school. And so they've made sure that that's a hotspot for their students out there. So rural communities, Luigi, is really actually probably the hardest hit, and those in the reservation as well. So it goes beyond just a laptop and connectivity, though there's other computer equipment as well that we've checked out.
Ramzad Udall, Miam, you teach math in the fall. And so you're going to be teaching in this. Are you teaching in this fall? What happened?
Yes.
I do wonder what happens if there's a special session. You're just going to have to take a few days off, something like that.
Right. If there's a special session, I'll just have to have a sub for a few days, which I hate to do, or depending on the timing of the day, I might be able to teach some of my classes and then come to the legislature.
So you haven't had to transition yet, because you haven't taught in the spring. Okay. All right.
Right.
You know, so the one thing I really want to ask that both Kevin and Kathy is that how you're going to deal with social distancing in the classroom. You know, that's, I have a 9-year-old, and I just can't foresee how a second or third grader or actually do social distancing in the classroom, right? So maybe they're able to kind of keep some semblance of order in the classroom itself, but what happens during recess, during lunch, I can't foresee how you're able to actually establish social distancing at the schools, and it's something that schools will have to figure out, right? But for the CTEDs, for example, you are dealing with older students, but how do you actually do social distancing, in a CTED setting?
Well, social distancing is one aspect to it. There's other health and sanitary and masking, and there's other things that we're going to do is to help along with that particular aspect of social distancing. But to your question to that, we are able to assign groups or individuals to particular equipment, rotate them through. We would have to alternate the modeling of instruction for a piece of equipment and be able to distance or at least spread the students out over a greater period or a greater length of distance, so either time or distance. So we are able to make those modifications, but again, we do other things in combination of social distancing as well. So, but it is a hands-on curriculum, and so that is certainly a challenge.
You know, there was a poll a couple of weeks ago in which that showed that a majority of the parents, I think it was like 52%, really want to send their kids physically back to the schools, right? So, but there's also 20% of them, roughly 20% of them, who really don't want to send their kids to school. I can tell you, for example, that in my son's case, we have three options. My son's schools gave us three options: fully online learning, a hybrid model, and then physically sending our kid to school. We still don't know. My wife and I, we still don't know what exactly we're going to do. But let's assume, for example, that there are parents like me who are, thinking twice about sending our kid to school at this point. And that's going to have a direct impact on ADM and ADM counts, which is the basis for how schools are funded. Let me ask Representative Michelle Udall, what has been the conversation surrounding ensuring that the schools, don't actually get a 20% drop in their funding, for example? Let's say if they get, a huge number of students not physically showing up, at schools.
Right, and I think it's been across the board that we need to count attendance to any student that they're educating. So if a school is educating a student, we need to count that as that student attending, whether they're in person or whether they're learning remotely. And so when we have multiple models like that, and the other thing we've talked about is every school needs to offer full-time in person as one of the options, so that parents who both work or who need that kind of an option, that it is one of the options. If they want their kids to get back to a normal school schedule, that they can do that. But the flexibility we've talked about is allowing a teacher to count a student as present, whether they're physically present or whether they're learning remotely. And that learning remotely piece is a little trickier on how you decide that they're learning remotely, whether it's simply that the student has made live contact with that student that day, or the teacher's made contact with the student that day over Zoom, over email, over a phone, or my preference is that the student needs to submit work for that day, because then we know that the student is getting an education, we know that they're learning for that day. So there's still some discussion on how we decide whether or not they count as attended that day, but there is broad consensus over we're going to count them as attended whether they were there in person or whether they were doing the work remotely.
So Senator Allen, I guess the same question for you. Go ahead, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you. I think we've got to be realistic. There's no doubt that what this COVID situation has really changed the dynamics of our schools. And well, it's changed. We've got to know that some of our students have fallen behind. We've got to know that just as the fact that kids have moved away, well, what's happened to them? Who's going to pick up where they've left off? It's a tremendous task that we have before us. And I think a part of whatever it is we decide to do about the flexibility and the funding, we also have to have an accountability piece there now. We have got to be sure that what we are doing are helping these children to move forward and learn. And thankfully, children seem to have a great immune system for this COVID virus. They are not being decimated under this virus, as say our elderly communities can be. And so thank heavens for that. And I think as school gets going and gets started, I think parents will gain more of a confidence, and I think that they'll be more willing eventually as we get rolling to send their children back. But regardless of what we do, there's a tremendous, I think, responsibility on our schools to determine that these children are learning, they are progressing, and that so that we can get caught back up. I mean, Arizona was doing great in moving along with our scores and the programs that we had. So I just I guess I'm worried about our kids and where they are academically. And I just hope that we can, and I do have confidence in our school districts, believe me, and in our teachers, but we can't kid ourselves. This has put us behind in the state of Arizona.
Ma'am, let me flesh that out a little bit. You talk about some accounting, a degree of responsibility that then schools are able to show. I do wonder in which ways. Do you have any? What are the proposals out there that are being talked about when it comes to accountability?
Well, in some of the legislation that I've been working on, after talking and having quite a bit of communication with my different district leaders, superintendents, and charters, I think it's really important when we get back to school to immediately do benchmark testing to determine where we're at. Because during that time, those 3 months, the school was operating in the manner that it was, there really wasn't any testing going on. There wasn't a lot of requirements on the schools for accountability of what the kids were doing. We didn't say you have to turn in this, or you have to do that. We kind of left it up to every individual school to figure out how they're going to track the student and what they were going to do for them, and how they're going to keep track of that. So we need to know right now where we're at. And I think we start off being sure, and then that benchmark testing, I think, should be turned into the state board. And so that we can and compile it. We need to compile the data, put it together, see where we're at. I think the schools want to know that. I know without a doubt they do. They want to know. And then there's going to have to be a certain amount of getting caught up. What about the algebra student that's taking Algebra 1 that went 3 months without any hands-on teacher to really help them? Is that student ready for Algebra 2? And those are the questions that are going to have to be answered, and there might have to be a lot of review. I was hoping some of that could take place this summer with different school districts, but the way things have been going, I don't know how much schools have been able to offer summer school and what has taken place there. But I think we've got a lot of work to do. I'm confident we can do it, but we've got to be realistic about what that is.
Kevin, I want to get your thoughts on that one. What do you make of
Sure.
Of the idea of accountability in the schools, and in addition to being able to track these students, right, and
Sure.
being able to count them, however whatever mechanism we use to count them.
Sure. Yeah, and Senator Allen brought up a term that benchmark testing. And so if you're not familiar with that term, it just means it's a starting point for which you're maybe to measure how students have learned from an initial point to a beginning point. But as Representative Udall knows, that there's different ways to measure student learning. It's not typically by maybe a traditional paper and pencil test, that there's all different ways to be able to do that. And particularly in CTE, we're very skills-based or standards-based. And so we measure students' learning based off of the masteries of the skills or based off of the mastery of the standards. And so sometimes that doesn't necessarily mean that a student needs to be in school for us to be able to assess them and measure that they understand or have learned a skill. So there are different ways for us to be able to understand what students know and how to remediate, as Sylvia Allen just had mentioned, that get those students caught back up again. So the other aspect, and one last thing to this, Luigi, is that's the reason that flexibility is so important. I believe that those teachers are out there, want to know the benchmark, what students are, what gaps, learning gaps there are, but they're very professional in making sure that those students learn those standards, have those skills, and they're holding themselves accountable in order to be able to show that students have progressed from a benchmark to another level of proficiency.
Kathy, you mentioned earlier that we count online students, we count students who show up physically, but we don't necessarily count the hybrid students. And there's and correct me if I'm wrong, there's also a requirement that if you're going to a CTED program, that you're supposed to show hours every day. Certain hours every day that you're actually, that you're actually doing your CTED program. Talk to us about what kind of flexibility do you, in fact, want to see in this arena?
We absolutely need the flexibility to have anytime, anywhere education in CTED. It's so important that in order to social distance in some of our labs for the hands-on work that our students need to do, and develop those skills, we need to be able to have 2 or 3 tracks of students and alternate them in and out of the facility on different days and different times. And so the hybrid, right now we have either the online option or the option for bricks and mortar in person in a seat. We have to have that in between. And that flexibility also needs to be for all school districts, not just CTEDs. But in our world, we are really looking at hands-on, and we need that flexibility to be able to educate a student maybe on a Tuesday, Thursday for 4 or 5 hours, and then maybe also a Saturday. So the 5-day-a-week, 1 hour a day person in a seat doesn't work anymore. That's antiquated. We need to be able to innovate as a state how we deliver education. And the silver lining of this pandemic is how we were able to pivot our educational systems and look at new ways of doing things. Why can't a nursing services instructor maybe do an asynchronous type of delivery using ITV so a student can be at home seeing that lecture, participating live? We have the technology, it exists. We just need the creativity and the innovation and the funding to make some of this happen. But the will is there. And I think we just have to look at things differently. So that's what I'm hoping we can do, is to have that flexibility and to be able to deliver in new ways and extend that even beyond the pandemic to better serve our students in rural communities, in communities, and for those with special needs that may need to stay at home.
So I want to pause here for a second, and then just remind our viewers and our listeners to please send in your questions. I'm sure you have, I'm seeing some of them already, and some of you have sent me questions earlier, but do send in your questions. We want to hear from you. We want to see what you're going through, what your experience has been, any questions for your kids, for your teachers, for your districts as well. And we'll try to get to as many of them as possible. So beyond, I think, Kathy, you mentioned earlier that this pandemic has sort of forced the schools, not just the CTED programs, but forced the schools, I guess forced everybody to really kind of think outside the box. And I'm imagining that some of the solutions that were designed to be temporary, deal with this pandemic, might become, in fact, long-term, more permanent solutions, because this virus doesn't look like it's going to go away anytime soon. Beyond this pandemic, there had been some issues that or challenges that CTEDs had faced, and they wanted to tackle those issues. For example, restoring 4-tier funding for CTE, for example. I want to ask Senator Allen and Representative Udall, what do you make of restoring that funding for 4 tiers, restoring 4-tier funding for CTE?
Yes, I've been supportive of that, especially in certain categories that I think it requires getting young people involved in these classes early, and to help them really become educated about those particular trades. We need CTE classes, the CTED, so desperately. We really do. Workforce development is such a huge issue out there. And I have been supporting 9th grade to return that funding. I just hope that next session, as we get into next session, that our economy is back rolling again, and that we will have the funds available that we can keep improving our education for our CTEDs, because it's really important. So just know that I'm willing to continue to look at that, and just hope that the money will be there, that we can keep, encouraging and showing the reasons why it's so important to get these kids involved at a young age, developing these workforce skills. And they love it. These hands-on classes, the kids love it. And they usually stick them out because it means so much for their future.
And Representative Udall, is, I guess, same question, ma'am. You're having to navigate a funding problem in which state revenue had dropped, and I think you're waiting on GLBC to give us firmer numbers, for example. And I think everybody's hoping that we're really starting to see the revenue drop start to go back up again. But it's not just the K-12 community, right? There's the hospitals that are looking for help. There are all kinds of industries that are looking for help. You're having to navigate and balance all this interest against a dwindling or, you know, a state revenue that had dropped significantly. But what do you make of you know, restoring that funding for the restoring fourth-year funding for CTE?
Yeah, and so I sponsored a bill this session to restore that funding, and it was making good progress and likely would have made it through were it not for the pandemic. So I am fully supportive of restoring fourth-year funding, especially for categories. And we had done it so that it was for any certificate or any program that led directly to employment in a high demand, median to high wage job. And so we really were trying to target those jobs where a student was going to be able to make good money on. And what we do know about CTED is that students are more likely to graduate from high school. They're more likely to go to college, which you wouldn't necessarily combine those two, because you would think, well, they've already learned a trade, so these are not college-bound students. But most of them do go to college, and they use that profession that they've learned to work their way through college and come out of college without debt or with very little debt. It actually, their college going rate is so much higher than the general high school graduate college going rate.
Yeah, you mentioned before the pandemic, it was on track to actually get voted out and pass and sent to the governor. There was very strong support in both chambers. What about now? What are the chances of that bill actually getting introduced, say in a special session, getting out and then reaching the governor's desk?
I don't think it's likely to happen in special session. I don't think we're going to see any bills that do additional spending in a special session. If you see bills dealing with spending, most of them will be cutting spending rather than adding spending, unless it's for specific things like distributing CARES Act money. So I don't think it'll happen this year. We'll have to address it next year, depending on what the revenue forecasts are.
And Senator
we're
Allen,
really in a waiting game.
Senator Allen, the same assessment, ma'am. It's probably not going to happen in the special session, but we'll see it come back up and get tackled next year.
Yes, I agree with that assessment, but it's an issue that it's not going to go away. I really think that does need to be restored, and we just have to hope and pray this economy will get back on its feet, because that'll be the key to it. Hopefully next session we'll see that it's not as dire as what we had thought. Right now, the numbers, that's why we're able to put off the special session right now. We didn't have to do it right before July 1st because the revenues are not quite as dire. So I'm optimistic, I really am, but I know it's an issue that's not going to go away.
We're going to start, try and answer some of our viewers and listeners' questions. Here's one from Jim, and I think Kathy or Kevin, you can answer this. Working out schedules between central CTED students and their homeschool was difficult enough before. If the regular feeder districts go with different sorts of hybrid schedule, it will really, really conflict with whatever the CTEDs are working on. What can be done to assist that? I guess, how do you manage the schedules? Kathy?
Well, many of our programs at Central Campus are offered on a 3-day-a-week schedule. So for example, on Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, and most of them are offered in the late afternoon and evening hours. So if all school districts are given the flexibility to be able to go to a hybrid model, I'm hopeful that those late afternoon, evening times will still be available for our students to be able to go to the CTED districts like Pima JTED and be able to engage in these career preparation areas. It's really critical right now as we look toward the recovery of our economy, that our students who are getting their licensed nursing assistant or their manufacturing skills, they are needed right now to help that economy recover. I just had a call this week from, or actually last week, from a local employer. He wanted more students in the manufacturing area. As his business is ramping up, he wants more of our students with the NIM certification to be able to hire because the demand is there. And I can also tell you that our nursing assistants are in heavy demand because of all the health concerns in the community. So more than ever, we are hopeful that we'll be able to work out a schedule as long as we're able to deliver afternoon and evening and even weekends like we currently do.
Kevin, here's a question from Carrie. I guess all of our panelists can answer this one, but here's Carrie. I hear parents are considering having their teenagers start online community college courses or trade schools in lieu of high school education. Can any of you comment on this concept and its pros and cons? Let's start with Kevin. What do you think of this concept?
Well, right now I can tell you that many of the CTEDs, if not all of them, work closely with their community colleges. And so in regards to how it may have an effect on the CTEDs, we're lockstep with community colleges anyways. And so I think that would continue. We do have a committed partnership with all of our community colleges. And so I think that they would look to us, we look to them to continue that partnership, because what we are doing is good for kids and what they're doing is good for students. And so I see that it would still continue to be a collaborative type of environment. And so CTEDs would be able to contribute to the success of those students.
Let me ask, I'm sorry, go ahead, Kevin. Yeah.
Well, I was just gonna go back a little bit. I do appreciate Senator Allen's and Representative Udall's support for CTEDs. And if without your leadership, without you carrying the water for our students and our communities, we don't know what we would do. You understand the connection between school and economic development, and we so appreciate your support and what you've done for CTEDs. And so I wanted to mention that before anything else. So.
I guess another way of asking the question is that, other Western democracies, Western countries, if you will, they have a really robust internship program in which, you're out of high school and you go into an internship program, and you can emerge out of that and go work for, let's say, a really good car company or any other company, and they have they've thought it through really well. And I wonder, what lessons can we learn from them, and maybe try and really have a robust internship program in the state. Senator Allen, what do you think of that?
Well, my mind was going back to your original question about
Go ahead, ma'am. Yep.
Parents, and I have to say what Kathy said about this COVID is really, it has changed, I think, a way a lot of parents are looking at educating their kids. I think it just has. And I absolutely believe in the word flexibility and different educational models. And I think also the internet, there's anything and everything on the internet that you can learn to do. And, when you're trying to fix a car, my husband goes to YouTube now to figure out how to put the part in. So it's amazing the opportunities we have out there. It's a wide open world that we can access. So I think you're not going to stop that. I think parents and students are going to look for different ways to educate. Okay, back to the question just asked me. Will you restate it?
Oh yeah, I talked about internship, but really what I had in mind is the apprenticeship program, right? We've seen that
yes, okay.
in other countries that they're really robust, and I kind of look at them and I kind of envy what they have, and I do wonder what you think of helping to boost our apprenticeship program in the state.
Yes, I like the apprentice idea. I think I agree with you. It is a wonderful way to get our young people out there and actually working in a field that they're interested in. And everybody knows that you really have to do something to learn how to do it. And so that's what the apprenticeship programs offer. Now, I know Representative Fillmore had a bill, how he was suggesting of how to do an apprenticeship program. I think is something we have to continue to look at and gather everybody's ideas of how we would do it and how maybe other countries, as you're saying, do it. But I think it's a great idea, especially for juniors and seniors, that they could have this opportunity. So any ideas like this, I think we need to explore. And but I want you to know I support that idea, and we just need to figure out how we do it.
Yeah, and can I just jump in? The CTEDs used to have a more robust apprenticeship program or internship program. It's gone by different names, and it used to be funded as a regular course. And when they did that, they did a really good job of it. That funding was cut during the recession and has not been restored. And so when we've talked about ninth grade funding, at least in the most recent bill, that was included in it to return to funding those. And it's really not very expensive statewide to do. I think the total cost statewide came up to like $800,000.
I'm sorry, you're talking about restoring funding for the internship programs for CTEDs. You're talking about less than $1 million. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And so it's a really good investment.
Well, another thought there, the more partnerships we can make with businesses and get them involved, if businesses themselves would create apprentice programs and bring them to us, because we have to have businesses to be able to do these programs. And so that partnership's really critical.
So, in fact, here's one question from Robert. How might CTE engage the private sector to provide students with personalized hands-on learning? I think a lot of this is already going on, but let me ask Kevin real quick. What's the level of engagement, which I assume is pretty high already?
Sure, thank you. Actually, it's a requirement that each one of our programs have an advisory board. I know that down in Pima JTED, they have a workforce development council. And so it's critical that we partner with industry to be able to help us to understand the latest trends, maybe the equipment that we need, create a pipeline of students into the workforce, into those areas of expertise for which we don't have. So not only is it a requirement that we have advisory boards, we understand the necessity that this relationship that we have between schools and industry are inextricably linked and cannot function without each other, because we serve them and they serve us. And so I don't know, Kathy, if that would kind of, I spoke for you in regards to Pima JTED, but so.
You're absolutely right, Kevin. It's important that we have a seamless articulation between high school, community college, even university, but it's all about industry being involved and telling us what are the certifications and credentials that they need to see, and how many job openings they have, and what we need to be doing with equipment to be able to train our students to be able to go directly into the workforce or to go to that next step. We do have a number of folks in Pima County working with Pima Community College, Pima JTED, and others in the IT and manufacturing areas, looking at a pre-apprenticeship in high school, then going into an apprenticeship and employment situation in industry with Pima Community College. So I think it's about system change and looking at a whole ecosystem of workforce development and those different pathways along that pipeline, with some of those even ending up in the university system at a higher level. So I think it's all of us working together and being on the same page and having the same goals, but it's more important now than ever.
So here's a kind of a follow-up question from Sapna. Does the COVID-19 crisis and the uncertainties around school schedules present an opportunity for JTEDs to deepen their relationships with employers and allow them to earn more high school credits for enhanced internships with employers?
Yes, absolutely. The easy answer to that is yes. But as I mentioned before, we're in this global problem solving effort. And so we're able to help industry educate students and according to give them the skills that they need to enter into industry, as well as what we were just talking about, industry supporting education in order for those students to be able to have those skills and those technical expertise to be able to enter into that industry. So business is looking to education, education is looking to business. There's going to be more fruit, as it were, out of this whole experience. And so the answer to that is yes.
So here's another question from Patrick. The panelists have spoken about student safety regarding COVID-19. And of course, the student population is not as vulnerable as, say, our older population to complications, right? So that's, we know that. What are your thoughts on, let me pose this to Kathy. What are your thoughts about the safety of teachers, especially those who fall into the high-risk categories? How do you ensure that they're safe?
That's a definite big concern. What we are doing in Pima JTED right now is we are having our principals and supervisors contact each of our teachers and staff to find out where they are regarding their comfort level of coming back. We didn't do a survey, but we're doing one-on-one phone calls to see where everybody is. And then the hope is that we may have a few of our instructors who might be vulnerable and need to be in charge of the online pieces to assist with those. Wherever we can provide the flexibility, we intend to do so. That said, it's very difficult when we are hands-on based. And so that's an excellent question, but I'm hopeful that we can find that balance between those that are comfortable and able to be one-on-one with the students or in small groups, and then also those that may need to teach from our online platforms.
So we're almost out of time, and I did promise Senator Sylvia Allen that we're not end promptly at 9 a.m. But I want to ask you, each of you, a quick question, which is, what has been the silver lining for you through this crisis that we face? And let me start with Senator Sylvia Allen.
Well, I think it's seeing the incredible ingenuity and thinking outside of the box of our education community, and seeing the way that in all areas, just like our CTED area, figuring out ways to keep our students still moving down the path so that they can be successful. That was the silver lining to me, to see how people can step up and that they can react in a situation like this, a crisis, you know, and that we can come through. So the other thing is, I think it has been have a step back and really look at the education system in Arizona and reevaluate and look at what we do and what we can do better and what we're going to, and how we can change things in the future to respond to what's happening. So I just want to say thank you to everybody out there. And I just think, I know how hard everybody's tried. Everybody has worked many, many long hours, all of our education community. So I want them to know that I really appreciate it.
Representative Udall?
I would say also innovation. Just, it's been a push to innovate, to do things we probably should have been doing all along in some cases. But I'm going to give another answer, because I think the big benefit to our students specifically is this notion, and certainly as a parent, it's something I've tried to enforce anyway, but this notion that learning doesn't only happen at school. That learning is something that should go on continuously, regardless of whether we're actually physically in the school building or not, or doing our homework right then or not. But that learning is a part of our world, and that it needs to be a part of our world. And I think that that's important for our students to learn and understand.
Kathy?
I'd have to say, well, I'm so proud of our staff and our students and our teachers and faculty, how they stepped up. I'm proud of our Arizona Department of Education, working with our governor's office and our legislators, and everyone's working together to look at what we can do best for students. And so to me, that's been the biggest silver lining, but also that renewed appreciation for the essential workers, such as those in the healthcare industry, those in the manufacturing industry, that renewed appreciation for some of these career fields that maybe we didn't have before.
And finally, Kevin, I think I forgot to mention, but Kevin is also the president of the Arizona CTED Consortium. Go ahead, Kevin.
Wow, all the good answers were taken. I think that we're on the precipice of a paradigm shift in education. We're given this, I don't know if any other time that we've had the opportunity to redesign the way that we look at education and collectively come to a solution for which can be better for our students and our economic development. We're right here. And so I think that there's going to be some really good nuggets, I call them nuggets, that come from this, in which we'll be able to do things better, more efficiently, more effectively. But I think it's also an opportunity to really look collectively at how we educate students and look at that system and evaluate it to maybe take it up to the next level.
Kathy, Representative Udall, Senator Sylvia Allen, Kevin, thank you again for your time. Really appreciate to our sponsors, the Arizona CTED Consortium, Tri-Advocates, and Marson Media. Thank you so much for engaging in this way. And you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you. You too.
Okay, bye-bye.